we're very excited about this webinar. This is our first of 3, and it's really using design principles to design your life. And we have, if you haven't had a chance to read this book yet, Designing Your Life, I want to encourage you to get it from the library or get it from a bookstore, and yeah, and take a look at it. It's a really unique way, I think, of looking at things. And I want to encourage you, if you don't have a piece of paper handy and a pen, to just grab a piece of note paper and a pen or pencil, because you're going to want to take some notes. And this is going to be a very reflective webinar, and we're going to make you do a little work. So, but fun work, I promise. So, and I want this to be an exchange. So if you have comments, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to blurt out if you feel comfortable with that. I really want this to be an exchange. So, and I know we have a lot of people, but I think we don't have too many people that it can't be a community conversation. This webinar is sponsored by the Eastern Michigan University College of Business. If you go to emich.edu/COB, you can look at all of our programs there. We have so many programs. Let's see. HR, organization development, operations, supply chain management, marketing, accounting, finance, entrepreneurship, and I'm sure there's a few more as well. So you can check those out. We also have, I will be running some 1-credit classes. If you have a need to get 1 more credit in to get financial aid or anything like that, they are at the master's level, but I'm kind of excited about those this fall as well. My name is Kimberley Barker, and I am a faculty member in the management department at Eastern Michigan University College of Business. I know I've had some of you in my classes, so I'm just so excited to see you again. And again, this is the book that we will be kind of going off of today, Designing Your Life. And our book last year was a book that I was a co-author in, and it was called You Can Create Positive Change at Work. And that is, if you want to check that out, that recently has gone out for sale on Amazon. So I just really love this quote today. It really resonated with me when I was preparing this. It's by Jacqueline Stavros and Sherry Torres. They have an amazing book on creating deeper conversations and conversations worth having. I think that's the name of their book. And it says, every person, place, and thing has something of value, some worth, some untapped opportunity, and one simply has to inquire into it. And I just when I read that this morning, I thought that's kind of what design thinking is all about, right? It's about being in tune to opportunities, and somebody, I think somebody is not muted. If you wouldn't mind just muting yourself, unless you want to chat, that would be perfectly fine, and that would make me happy. But it's really being in tune to opportunities that are out there at a whole nother level, and that's really what it's about. So we've talked about where you are in the world today. If you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, what perspective do you bring today to this webinar? Are you a professional? Are you a student? Are you an academic? Are you here to change the world? Are you in HR? Just tell us, just put in the chat. Aw, thank you. Helen said she's been trying to read this book for a long time. Yes, you're here to change your life. That's wonderful. And Wendy, you are a professional, and I know you are a lifelong learner, so that is wonderful. Grad student, someone who's looking for work, professional, recent EMU grad student, wonderful. And, you know, it's just kind of nice to know what folks' orientation is that are in the room, HR professional, academic. Thank you so much. The next question I'm going to ask is, and some of you have already shared this, what is your intention for today's webinar? Why did it pique your interest? Why did this webinar pique your interest? So Bua says they are in the process of designing their life based on the book. Yes. Christopher says to be curious, learn, and make connections. An OD professional. Yes. And, you know, I was watching the video just before this that is linked to the invite, and they said that there are kind of 3 chapters that people, you know, kind of fall into 3 buckets when they're looking at designing their life. Some it's in the beginning, some is kind of in the middle, and some is kind of at the end. I think, you know, that's kind of ironic, right? But and it can be really at any time throughout your life. But Amy says she's picked this book up several times, had a real interest to be in charge of her own trajectory. Oh, that's wonderful. A professional engineer. I love that. A recent grad. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And again, if you have not gotten out a piece of paper, I want to encourage you to get out a piece of paper, and because we're going to take some notes. I want you to take some notes. And really, this is going to be a period of reflection. We really want you to do some reflecting and think about, you know, I think a lot of us kind of know when we're little what we want to do when we grow up. I mean, after I wanted to be a firewoman and a ballerina, right? And a horse jockey for a while. Then I decided, oh, I think I want to be a teacher, but I never thought about being a college professor, right? So I knew I didn't want to teach like elementary school. And so every girl in my school wanted to be an elementary school teacher, right? So I was a little confused by that. But, you know, a lot of times we do kind of have these leanings when we're younger, but we don't really know what to do with them, right? So I do kind of want to uncover some of those as well. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to Chris Dotson, who is the manager of learning and talent development at Eastern Michigan University. He is the president of the Greater Ann Arbor SHRM Club. And you can give a plug there, Chris, if you want, give a web address or whatever. And he's an OD consultant. He does leadership coaching, strategic planning, team development, employee well-being. And I just know that we are so lucky to have you, Chris, at EMU. I met Chris several years ago. I liked him the minute I met him. He's just a really all-around great professional. And I'm gonna just give you a few minutes, Chris. And if you could just talk to us a little bit about your journey. So how and when did you figure out what you wanted to do for a living?
Yeah, well, thanks, Kim, for the invitation today. I'm excited to spend the next hour with you all, learning with you. I really love the way this has been set up already. So great job with this, Kim. I love the built-in reflection. It's so pivotal for the learning and in looking back. And I enjoyed thinking through these questions and putting together some thoughts on these as well. And you know, like you, after I decided that in 3rd grade I was going to be a fireman because that's what we all were going to do, I quickly moved into the fact that I was going to be a professional basketball player, and turned out I wasn't tall enough or fast enough, and I couldn't jump high enough either. So after we kind of set those aside, it was interesting. Then it started to transform into, well, you know what? I love sports, so maybe what I'm going to do, and I'm really good at math. I like teaching. So maybe I'm going to be a math teacher and coach varsity basketball. And so that's kind of where things were going. You know, as I went into college, I did my undergrad here at EMU in the management concentration. I ended up spending a lot of years. Yep, that's right. A lot of years doing restaurant management. I actually started doing that when I was just graduating as a senior in high school. So I did have a great opportunity where I was taking management classes at EMU and getting to hands-on apply it at night after class
Oh yeah,
in the
that is,
workplace.
you really learn how to work with people in that environment, don't you?
You get, yeah. And it's like, oh, I'm learning this in the classroom and I can go easily apply it. So that worked out really, really well. But really, I didn't figure out what I wanted it to do, until my 30s. I'm 38 now, so I spent the better part of a decade and even a little bit more in a field and in a job where I was really successful. I made good money. There were parts of it that I really enjoyed, but big parts of it that weren't right for me. And, so I burned out of the work. I kind of hit a wall with it, and it was time to make a change, and so the clues were always there, as I reflected back on what really brought me excitement, really brought me energy, what brought me joy. It really was the study of leadership and teams. And really, I was able to see through my years of restaurant experience, what were those differentiators with teams that were highly successful and collaborative, and those ones that failed and really just did not consistently hit their goals. And so I fell in love with it. So thankfully, I have a really supportive family and wife who are able to say, hey, let's have you take a big pay cut at the same time. Let's pay for a master's program for you at the same time, and we'll just figure it out. And so that was my first big pivot, was doing that. I was making 60% less money than I was making before. So it was indeed a lifestyle change when I went back and started going to school. But the clues were there. When I look back on my favorite class in my entire undergrad, it was Management 486 with Greg Husko. And we read Malcolm Gladwell in that class, and we read The Tipping Point. And it was just the first time I had really been indoctrinated into that study and into that field of those social sciences. And it was just riveting. I just absolutely loved it. So reflecting back on that, it's like, well, why can't I go be an OD consultant? Why can't I get into this line of work? So I went back, I started working towards my degree and went through the Mishrod program. So proud alum of the Mishrod program. And then I took a job slightly after graduating and in a similar role to what I'm in now. It's in a specialist role, but same department, doing talent management and organizational development work. And so,
Chris,
like I said,
can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please jump in.
So first of all, I have to say, I love Malcolm Gladwell. I love anything he has done, but The Tipping Point and Outliers, if you have not read both of those books, write them down on your piece of paper because they're just wonderful. But would you describe leadership and developing teams? Would you kind of describe that as your passion, if you will?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, leadership is absolutely, my passion. It's interesting. We think about, and I love the quote that you shared about the uniqueness and the value that people can bring. I think all of us naturally love to help other people, and we love challenges. And so it's about finding and discovering, how do you do that? How do I go about helping people or making an impact in this world? And for me, it's through the development of leaders and through the development of teams. There's just so much data and research, which I always look into, that just supports how important the manager and the direct supervisor are to the engagement of their direct reports and their well-being and how well they do in their life. So if that's the case, and we know that engagement in the United States is only at 32% of highly engaged people, it seems to me that a lot of energy and effort should be put forth into developing the skill sets of leaders so that they can be highly successful, so that they can support their teams. And at the same time, it's not for me to beat up on managers. This is the most difficult time that there's ever been to lead and manage teams. We went through a pandemic. There's all of this hybrid work. Teams are smaller. You're wearing all these different hats. And I was like, oh, and by the way, make time to be a great leader for all of these people, right? These people need that support. Yeah. They need that upskilling. And so for me, it's how can I take what I naturally do well, or I can take in a lot of information, I can put it into a design. I am a how person, right? It's all these great things we hear about in theory about, oh, this is great. It makes sense. I connect with why this is important. We all need to connect with our why. Our why is great. Simon Sinek's why is terrific. Your purpose should be great. The most burned out people in the world work in hospitals and in K through 12. I think the why is pretty important in those two things, right? But the what and the how kind of gets in the way sometimes. So we need to be purposeful about what is the work that we're doing that really brings us joy, brings us energy, gets us into that flow state where time just disappears and we're just loving what we do. And then to your point, Kim, getting back and reflecting, what are those things that really bring me that? What are those things that really bring it, and how can I do more of that on purpose?
Well,
right?
that was my next
That's
question
it.
is how important has reflection been in your life?
It's the single most important thing, I think, to your development. I think there's a little bit of a misnomer that we learn by doing. We learn by doing, but really by the purposeful reflection we do after the doing, right? When we're trying something new, we're learning, it's uncomfortable. We can easily, go into fight, flight, or freeze, right? We run away. Nope, that didn't work. Scratching that. Right, we can fight and say, I'm going to keep pushing forward, which is great. Or sometimes we can just freeze in these moments, and sometimes it's appropriate to do any one of those three things. Sometimes we just have to acknowledge that it is difficult. We are learning. We're on a journey of life. There's these different phases we go in, and hey, you just keep moving. You're moving forward, but you have to pause and reflect. I'll give a couple of things that I think are important related to reflection. And okay, we'll talk about design thinking in regard to it. Stop scheduling meetings for an hour, schedule them for 45 minutes.
Oh,
You need to leave time in between your meetings for reflection. How did that last meeting just go? And then would it also allow and reflect what went well? How can I build off of that? What might I do a little bit differently when I'm interacting with these people? This person didn't respond so well to that. How might I do something a little bit differently next time? And then it also allows you to slow down and set your intention for the next meeting or activity that you have in your time. So planning those throughout your day is purposeful. Then spending time at the end of the day, thinking about those reflective pieces, right? And thinking about, hey, how might I apply the successes I had elsewhere tomorrow? Where maybe did I trip up a little bit and I might try things a little bit different? Who did I help today? Who helped me today? Did I accept help from others when they did it? Because it doesn't do that great if you're only offering help and never receiving it. So I want to point that out as being important. And where were those places we talked about earlier where you get in that flow state where you're energized, you're excited about your work? And how can you do more of that on your calendar tomorrow, later this week, next week, right? And if you're a manager, how can we pull that out of our employees when we're having one-on-ones with them as opposed to these status updates? You do it by asking them questions, right? When did you get into that energized flow state at work last week? Oh, awesome. How can we get you doing more of that work where you're feeling empowered, you're feeling engaged? And the last part I'll say about reflection is once a quarter, get away from the office, put a half-day block on your calendar and just go into some deep reflection, right? Think about what you've accomplished in the last quarter. Think about your wins. How can you build off of those wins, right? A lot of what I'm talking about is like a strengths-based a framework where we're always focusing on what went well first and how we can build off of that. Not to ignore your weaknesses or where you had gaps. Then you flow into those gaps and like, hey, what might I do a little bit differently? Let's set some goals. Am I still on the trajectory that's aligning with my purpose, with my values, with my goals for the person I want to become so that I can move into this next quarter and do it effectively? And am I still on the right path? Or do I need to pivot? Is this a point where I maybe consider pivoting? So I think reflection is so crucial.
Chris, you have so many things I want to comment on. Some of you might be familiar with Eileen Fisher. She has a clothing line, and in the beginning of every one of her meetings, they have 2 minutes of focus, and they can do whatever they want. They can meditate, they can write in their planner, they can whatever, but it allows people to pivot into the meeting, right? And come with their whole selves. And I just love that. And I was doing it for a while and it kind of dropped off, and I'm thinking, oh no, maybe I'll start doing that again.
That reflective piece, even with teams and team meetings, is really powerful too, right? What was a win that you had, in the last week? What was a new thing that you learned? What's something you're excited for that's coming up next week? So even be able to share that and hear those reflections from your colleagues, really powerful, really powerful. And for you to be able to share things you're excited about, really cool too. And also clues to talent on our similarities and our differences. And then you can start to think about how we can leverage the unique talents of the individuals. Anyway, very powerful way to think about it in the team session as well.
And when I start a class, I usually try to say, who has something good to share? And oh my gosh, sometimes, it goes on for 5 or 10 minutes. And all of a sudden I just feel so charged right? In a good way. There's so much positive going on that I wasn't even aware of, right? And I think when we focus more on the positive rather than the negative, it can take us to a new place. But I have to ask you, Chris, I'm sure you've been stuck once or
Oh,
twice
yes.
in your life. How did you become unstuck?
The biggest thing is, again, it's deep reflection. It's just taking that time to pause and slowing down. I'm naturally a very fast moving person with my work. I am an achiever, number one, as far as Clifton strengths, for those who are familiar with it. So I am a charge forward, get tasks done, keep getting better, keep improving type. And so I have to really be thoughtful about slowing down and reflecting. It's also just helpful to have, that board of directors, that person board of directors that you can rely on. So my wife, my parents, close friends that I can share with. Sometimes it's advice, but sometimes it's just being able to talk it through and for them to ask me questions and really just think through it. And then ultimately coming back and saying, am I making decisions and taking actions that align with values? And a lot of my values are aligned with like growth and learning and being curious, and am I getting stuck in sunk costs where it's like, well, I'm just so far down this path, I might as well just keep going with it. It's like, but if we keep going that way, like, are we ever actually going to change, right? Are we ever really going to make that big change when we need to? And the one other thing I'll say is, and I did some reading on this recently, where we talk about how we often are making decisions from a fear-based mindset. Our brain naturally wants to keep us safe. So when it senses something new or something different, sometimes it wants us to kind of slow down and keep doing what we've always been doing because that's safe, right? So sometimes our own mind is not the best mind to even give ourselves advice. Sometimes you have to step outside of it. So I started asking myself the question, what advice would I give somebody else who's in this situation, right? To kind of third point data it, right? And so that's where I kind of can pull myself out of that and connect cognitively with saying, but what should I be doing here, right? Is fear getting in my way of making a big change or getting unstuck when things aren't quite right with me? So align with values, acknowledge that fear might be present, and then being thoughtful about what questions am I asking myself.
Oh my gosh, I love everything that you said. And, thinking about who is on your own personal board of directors, right? Or who is in your kitchen cabinet, right?
Love that. That's a good phrase.
Yeah, because those are people you trust, right? Those are people who can tell you like it is, right? And sometimes they can help you see things that you can't see for whatever reason, right? For me, sometimes it's that I'm just too close to a situation. Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much. Does anybody have a question for Chris before we kind of start going through the lovely slide deck a little bit more? You can feel free to ask it in the chat, or feel free to unmute and ask it in person. We have an attorney that's joining us, an OD coach. We have a really diverse bunch here today, and I'm just so excited about that. Okay, well, you're going to stick around, Chris, right? So
yep, I can hang out to the top of the hour, so I'll be around.
Thank you. So if you all would just take a minute to think about, why do you work? And I don't want it to be because I got bills to pay, right? We all probably have bills to pay, right? So why do you get up in the morning and choose to go to that place called work? And I just want to take a minute to think about that and write it down. Why do you work? Is it because you want to help others? Oh, and I love it. Somebody is drawing on this, and I think that is wonderful. But what motivates you to go to work? Hopefully it's not just so you can have a retirement someday, right? And Chris, I was probably a decade behind you when I thought, okay, what do I really want to do when I grow up? I probably should have been grown up at that point, but I didn't think I was.
I think it's just incredibly valuable to try a ton of things early in your career and continue to experiment, because the more things you try, the more you're going to learn where your niche is, and the further I get into it, the more and more it's becoming more vivid and more clear as to where I want to make an impact in this world and how I can do it. Right. Because I was so generalized as a restaurant manager. I've been doing talent management, learning and development for the last 5 years. And now I'm really moving into a space where I'm just focusing more on the leadership coaching and the team developing. But if I didn't have all those other experiences in the past, who knows where I would have landed today.
Exactly. Exactly. And I got quiet. I went in a room by myself and I just sat there and I just wrote, right? I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I took notes, and that just really helped form what I wanted to do next. One thing I love about this book, the authors say anti-passion is their passion. So they really don't like the word passion, which I think is pretty good, because a lot of people, what does passion have to do with work, right? Well, maybe it could have something to do, but they call it purpose. What is your calling, right? What are some other words that we could use instead of passion? What makes you want to wake up in the morning, right? But really, where do you get energy? Yes. And that, what is your vision? Yes. What is your vision? I think you have to have that. You have to write it down. What feels like you never have to work a day in your life? Yes. Where do you feel impactful? I get so much energy from being in the classroom, right? Passion feels like alignment. Mind, body, spirit. Absolutely. And I love this, where it says this quote, Savaya, oh goodness, Sabram Unisiyawani, I guess, something like that. Where awareness goes, energy flows, right? So a lot of times we focus on what we don't want, and that's where the energy goes, right? We need to focus on what we want more of in our life, and to emphasize that. And even in the workplace, we need to focus on, with our colleagues, what do we want to see more of, right? Be an example. If you want to see more collaboration, be that ultimate collaborator. What makes you curious or excited about work? Now, work can be it is a 4-letter word. And it's not only rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns, right? But how can you make the most of your work? What part of your job gets you excited and piques your curiosity, makes you want to do more of what that is? Think about in your job currently today. What is that? And go ahead and write that down. I just started my PhD program, and it was our first guest speaker, and he came in and he told us, if you don't have a journal, get a journal today. And I was like, is this what I'm paying good money for? I thought, what the heck? And I'm telling you, I think I just started my 11th. And it's really fortunate as you get older, because you forget things. So okay. Oh, somebody. Oh, I think I'll go ahead and. Okay. So, and I'm telling you, it was probably worth the entire expense of my PhD, is to have those journals. I didn't even know what to write in the beginning. I was like, what do I write in a journal? So I remembered Oprah said to write down 3 things every day you're grateful for, right? So that's what I started writing. And now, I don't know, I just sit and write things. And thank goodness, because I'm in a meeting, I write it down and I go back. And, and then I look at I'm like, oh my gosh, I would not have remembered that otherwise. And it sure beats having a stack of sticky notes, right? what gives you a bias towards action? Right? What makes you want to take the ball and run with it? What helps you look at problems through different lenses? We all have lenses that we look at things through, right? And some of us have more of like an administrative lens. Some of us have more of like a creative lens, maybe entrepreneur lens, a people lens, right? What helps you look at problems through different lenses? And I've also heard it described as putting different hats on, right? What hat gets you the most excited to try to solve a problem? And where does your awareness go? And when do you love radical collaboration? When do you get excited about working with people? Is there anybody who wants to share? Oh, we still have some people coming in. Is there anybody who wants to share about what gets them excited? When do they feel like they want to take the ball and run with it at work?
Here is Alex.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have done quite some work, for instance, in my organization, in doing in OD work, for instance, putting a new performance management system in place, the employee performance management system. And we work in teams, focus groups, and what excites me is when, after you've taken people through the sessions, after we work together, and then the feedback is that what you are doing is adding value to us. What we are doing is adding value to us. It's making us improve. Then I get excited. So
yeah,
that's what.
That is wonderful. And, you know, and when you get that excitement, it just makes you want to continue on, right?
Yes,
continue
actually.
on, keep going, right?
Yeah.
That's so important. Thank you for that, Alex.
I'm curious about radical collaboration. I love that language, Kimberly. I'm like, and I think about, as I'm looking at projects and programs and, you know, activities, that oftentimes stakeholder pools are too small, right? And so this idea that not enough people aren't at the table. And so I think I practice radical collaboration under a guise of diversity and inclusion and belonging, right? Like, you know, like from expanding this group of people who should have been, I'm going to use the language of should have been part of the project or the program and are not. And that energy of having those different voices, which can be disparate and difficult, right, to hold in a container, but to give life to that, and then to come out with a co-created solution that's better than maybe what had been in my head or somebody else's. Yeah, so I think I'm going to take your radical, or whoever's language, radical collaboration.
It's from the book. It's from the book.
There we go. Of like, I think I'm actually going to use that because I think I've been doing it without some language around it.
Right. Oh, thank you for that. And, you know, you raised so many good points. First of all, you got to make sure you have the right people at the table, right? And I think a lot of times not enough effort goes into that. Who should be at the table, right? What are the people that need to be in this meeting? right, in this retreat. Because if you don't have the right people at the table, you're going to have a half outcome, right? You're not going to have a complete outcome that really does the trick. So I think that's really, really important.
And we get the same of the same, right? Of like, well, if I keep inviting the same people to the conversation, I'm going to keep getting the same, right? And maybe the same is okay, right? You know, no shade on sometimes same is the right answer. You know, and a lot of times I think with much of what's going on in the world today, same is not the answer.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Deborah, do you have something you'd like to share?
I wanted to add on, you know, I love the idea of this inclusion and diverse mindsets and lots of different people, but I also think what often gets neglected is our customers and making sure that we bring our customers to the table in an iterative way. So in the beginning, but throughout our process, you know, I think about what excites me is working with a group of people on really gnarly, meaty problems that are difficult to solve. And without lots of different perspectives, we can't do it. But then I think how important it is, and sometimes people find it a pain, to bring our customers in or the people we're giving service to throughout the process, because that involves changing it. But I think that is so important because they're part of the solution and they're the people that are going to own the solution. So I think this has really been neglected over the years. And I know design thinking completely brings the customer into the room and focuses on that. So I do want to highlight that.
Thank you so much. And that is so true. When I worked at a health system, we brought patients and families in, right? And we didn't always love what they had to say, right? But guess what? They made us face things that made it better, right? The improvement then came. And we're part of, we have a professional development committee that I'm working on. And we just brought students in, right? Because we wanted to hear our students' voices on what we could do better in the College of Business and how we could create that culture. And and sometimes those aren't the easiest conversations to have, right? But wow, what a difference it makes in the end product. And kind of, I love the book Humble Leadership, right? With Ed and Peter Shine. And one thing they say is the leader's job has really changed. And it's not about making all the decisions. And I think a lot of leaders still think that that's their job. I'm here, I need to be the smartest one in the room, I need to make the decisions. But really their job is to harness the ideas, the suggestions, right? And take all those and synthesize it into a plan that everyone can use to move forward. But that kind of takes somebody without a huge ego sometimes, right? So yeah, thank you, ladies. Okay, we're going to move right along. And what I'd like to do is I'd like you to think about, you to create a little dashboard. In the book, it's kind of like a cute little dashboard there. You can do it however you want, but have one end be empty or zero and have one end be full. And we're going to have 4 sections. We're going to have work, play, love, and health. And I'd like you to, along that scale, right? What is your work life like? Is it full? Is it halfway as far as satisfying and meeting your needs? Or is it at 0? What about play? Do you feel like you have enough time for play? We were in a work meeting last night and we were joking. We were like, the 4th of July, it made us all a little off kilter, right? Having that week to have some fun, right? And but it helped us all feel a little refreshed. right? So that we could engage again and really enjoy our work, get back to what we enjoy doing. What about love? And what about health? Do you feel like you have habits of health and you have arrived? Do you feel like you're 3/4 of the way there, halfway there, a quarter of the way there? I had a boss say to me one time, he said, on these things, you have to have at least 2 that you are doing well at. If you don't have 2, you're really kind of off kilter, right? And you're not firing on all cylinders. And so just take a minute and reflect on that. And then after that, just write a sentence or 2. What one is like something you'd like to focus on? How is it really going? We know work is never done, right? Play and health and love, they're not really never done either, right? But ask yourself if your problem is actionable. And what can you do? What can you do to make those better in your life? I've really, to give an example, I've really been focusing on my health. I've just really been trying to make sure I eat well, make sure I exercise almost every day, make sure I'm getting a good night's sleep, because oh my gosh, I feel so much better when I do that, right? It's easier said than done. But that is one thing that I'm really working on right now. And then in the interest of time, some of you might still be writing. Please feel free. I'm just gonna kind of go to the next section on total engagement. So when do you experience complete involvement in an activity? And these are questions from the book. This section is on page 45, if any of you have the book handy. And they talk about flow, right? They say flow is engagement on steroids. Flow is a state of being in which time stands still. You are totally engaged in an activity, and the challenge of that particular activity matches up with your skill. So you're neither bored nor anxious because it's too hard. This engagement is almost euphoric. You are in the zone and it is freaking awesome. Flow was discovered by Professor McCallie, I can't even say the last name because it's so long, who has researched this phenomenon since the 1970s. When he first described the state of flow, he studied the details, activities of thousands of people who were going through their lives, and was able to isolate this very special form of intense engagement. So, Chris, I'm thinking that when you are most engaged and in the flow, well, why don't you tell me? Chris Dotson, when are you most engaged and in the flow? I bet I could guess, but why don't we just hear from you?
Sure. Yeah. I'm working with in a collaborative group or one-on-one with somebody, typically, small groups, 8 to 10 to 12 or less. And ideas are flowing, they're shared, everybody's participating, we're building off of each other's ideas, right? It's okay to share a different idea than other people. That psychological safety exists, but we talk about doing big things and how are we going to do them really well? And then we really work that plan. Like I love that brainstorming part in the beginning, but I also love that really thoughtfulness on how do we systemize it and bring it to life and then achieve those. So I enjoy all phases of that process, but I think the undercurrent there is that the team is cohesive, they're excited, they're bought in, they have ownership over it, and there's a free flow of ideas. When that's happening, and or when I'm either personally experiencing it or others are experiencing those aha moments where it's like, oh my goodness, I've never thought about it before that way. Like that is just, and then you can just let the mind kind of run wild with this new way of thinking. Yeah, very exciting for me, as you can tell. I could talk about this all day.
Let me ask you, Chris, I'm sure you've had a few introverts on your teams. How do you, because I have found sometimes the introverts have the best ideas. How do you get them to share as much? Like I'm an extrovert, so I put my ideas right out there, but you know, sometimes introverts aren't as quick to do that. How do you get them to be as forthcoming with ideas?
A couple things. One, I would share the meeting topic out ahead of time, and I would ask that people bring their own ideas into the meeting. So we're not just making it, because some people are just really good at the moment at just, you know, shooting up from the hip and have ideas. Some people need a little bit of time. So I would give the agenda ahead of time and ask that people come with 3 ideas on X topic, you know, so there's a little bit of that. And then we're going to invite people to participate in that way. I would also, especially if it's a larger group like this for an introvert, I'm an ambivert, I'm in the middle. I know I can put on my extroverted face like I am today, but I really am more towards the middle of that continuum. So doing this is exciting, but also I'm a little tired after I do things like this. But for me,
Me too.
Getting people into small groups where they can share ideas and do like a partner share, and then say, hey, what was something interesting that your partner shared with you, right? So now all of a sudden it's like we can give somebody else the voice to share for them, or in small groups, get into small groups. And what are some of the ideas that were shared by the group? So they can have that more small, intimate conversation and still have their voice brought forth. And then thirdly, as the facilitator, you know, pay attention to who's participating, you know, who's not. Hey, haven't heard from you yet. Do you have any, what thoughts might you have on this? I'd love to have your opinion. So you're purposefully also, you know, calling on them, knowing that for some, they may not love that. So that's why you give that agenda ahead of time, let them think about it ahead of time, and or put them in small groups. There's all these little facilitation pieces we can build into our meetings to make it safer for our introverts.
Oh, I just love those. I love those suggestions. I'm a sticky note queen. I love sticky notes. So write your ideas on a sticky note and put it on the wall, right?
That's right.
When do you have at work now great inner clarity? So you just know what to do and you know how to do it. At what points does that come through? I have a point where we're talking and talking and talking and talking, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just have to do something, right? Like we've talked it out and now we just have to move in that direction, right? That's when I'm a really good person, or I should say that's one of my skills is, okay, we're done talking. How do we move that towards action? And that gets me excited. It really gets me excited when we can begin to do that. And when are you totally calm and at peace? Okay, so I know our time is really dwindling down. So I'm gonna ask you, and that you can add this as a new section on your piece of paper or in your journal, but I'm gonna ask you to really think about your purpose some more and your good time journal exercise. So really think about, when do I really feel purposeful? And when am I happy? When am I happy? What am I happiest doing? Right? And you can use that in relation to the dashboard, health, work, play, love. But you can also just jot down ideas. When am I happiest? When do I know I'm having a good time? When do I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose? And like Chris said, ask your cabinet, ask your board of directors, identify who is your own board of directors, and ask them for feedback. I saw a very dear friend this morning who I hadn't seen in a number of years. And she said to me a number of years ago, Kim, I see you in some sort of PR. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm an operations person. You know, I was like an operations manager at that time. And that's what I thought was, you know, it had me firing on all cylinders, if you will. But what I didn't know is eventually, not that I'm in PR, but I do kind of promote things that I really want to put out into the world. And I guess I hadn't identified that yet in my life, what that is. And for me, it's positive business principles and leadership. Those are just really, really important. So she had hit the nail on the head, but it puzzled me. It puzzled me for a number of years. And then one day it clicked and I was like, oh my gosh, she was so right. Right. So ask those people that you trust. When do you see that I'm at my best? Right. What do you think I'm good at? But it has to be someone you really trust, because, you know, you want to make sure that you're getting feedback, that somebody that knows you pretty well, right? And really knows what you're like in relation to whether it's work, whether it's health, whether it's play, whether it's love. But also just spend some time recording that, because I think somewhere inside of us, we know, right? We kind of know when we're our best. I mean, sometimes we need some validation, but we do have that idea. So we're going to ask, it said in the invite that we had 2 sessions, but we actually broke it into 3 sections. So we do have 2 more sessions, I should say. In our next session, we're going to really get into design thinking a little bit more. What is it, right? What are those steps in design thinking, and what does it entail? I might even send out a couple videos for you to watch when I send out this replay on what is design thinking. It's really about having that plan and working that plan and then tweaking it, right? And making it better. But you have to have your starting point. If you don't have that starting point, it kind of doesn't work as well to go into that design thinking phase. So that's why they have so many questions in the beginning of the book. And then based on what you're doing in your good time, purpose and good time journal exercise, create some action plans, right? Create some action plans on things you would like to do in your life. Sign up for an exercise class, right? What are steps? They can be baby steps, right? Go back to school and get a PhD. That's kind of a big step, right? Or go back and get a master's, right? But think about, okay, what are some steps in that direction? And then we're going to talk about doing some information interviews next time. And, you know, really doing that research to know that that's the direction you would like to move in. So before we end today, I hope you have a piece of paper that has a lot of little jots and notes on it. I'd like you to think about what worked well for you with this webinar today. One thing I know that worked really well for me is to have an amazing guest speaker named Chris Dotson, who really gave us a lot of food for thought. So put in the chat what worked really well today in this time together. And what would you like to see more of next time? So yes, Chris is getting a lot of kudos in the chat, which he very, very much deserves. The reflection questions, Deborah says were helpful. We will have more of those. More time to reflect on the questions and maybe less questions. Yeah, I think that's really good, Wendy or Deborah. I think that I wanted to move it along at a pretty good pace, but I will definitely ask for some more report outs, because that's one thing I get kind of excited about when somebody has an aha and they share it. I'm like, oh my gosh. Sometimes I'm like, that's me too. And they said it in a way that I could have never put it together, right? Or couldn't have been that time, right? So yes, I think we might have some breakout rooms next time. So I want you to seriously think about what action plans you have as a result of this. And we will have some time in the breakout room. What would you like less of besides me talking? Is there anything you would like less of in our session 2? Oh, thank you, Morgan. And thank you, Wendy. I really want to encourage you, if you haven't gotten this book, get this book. There is a workbook you can purchase with it. There's a lot of really good stuff. I'm trying to delve into it and kind of giving you the meat in the webinars, but there's a lot of meat in these books. So oh yes, have people mute themselves. That would be really wonderful.
Kimberly, I have a question.
Include page numbers on the slides. That is a wonderful suggestion. Thank you so much. Yes, who has a question?
Me. Hi, Kimberly. Just a question. I know that there's a workshop that like the authors of the book do that is paid, right? Like they have this paid workshop.
I think if you Google designing your life, I think you can find it.
Yeah. So, but what's the difference? Like, why is the other one paid, this one for free?
Well,
like,
I don't know actually, and I don't know exactly what they offer. I did ask them to come, and it didn't work with their schedules. And we're kind of just teaching this as the College of Business Management department. We're kind of teaching it based on our takeaways from the book. So I can't really answer that question effectively. Joyce says the authors do teach at Stanford, so that might be why it costs a little more. They do teach at Stanford University. So, I mean, basically, it's kind of what we're devising out of the book. I'd like to think they're pretty similar, but because we're just taking, the high points from the book. But yeah. But that's something I would certainly encourage you to check into if you would like.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I will send out, when I send this replay out, I will send out the link to the next session if you would like to join us. And please remember, Joyce says, and she wants to encourage everyone to get the book since it lays out exercises to do. It does. This is not like a novel kind of book, right? I mean, it is full of stops and, writing, and you fill this book. I mean, this book is almost like a workbook. It's almost like they don't need an additional workbook, but yes. So make sure you check that out. And again, thank you. And I look forward to when we meet, and I think it's 2 weeks from today, when we meet again. I look forward to hearing some of your action plans. And I want to share, Chris, I worked really hard at making this. Thank you, Chris Dotson, for coming today and sharing your wisdom with us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me today.
Have a great week, guys.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.